Hello class and welcome to Sport Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism. Today we're just going to be going over the syllabus and some course policies, and then there'll be a small brief lecture over topics that you should be aware of and have some familiarity before we really dive into some more of the advanced content in the next few weeks. So this course is going to focus on the study of nutrition with strategies designed to help meet nutrient demands for physical activity, exercise, and we're also going to cover metabolism and then athletic performance as it relates to kinesiology. So essentially we're going to be taking all of the basic biological functions that are associated with digestion, metabolism, and nutrient usage and utilize that information to create personalized nutrient profiles for individuals. So the main purpose of this course is for you to have a strong understanding of the basic processes associated with metabolism and how those can be utilized in more of an applied setting. There's only one required textbook or material for this specific class, and it's going to be the McGraw-Hill SmartBook Connect devices. For more information on how to access this, I recommend going into web courses and looking at all of the McGraw-Hill Connect materials I've provided. There's personalized assistance and videos that show you how to opt in and opt out of them if you already paid for this, or if you're looking for a different access code, that type of a thing. So again, this is the only required material. You will need access to it. This isn't something that you can get away with not using. A significant portion of your grade comes from interacting with the SmartBook activities, so you definitely need to look into getting this as soon as possible. And all of the information for how to access it, again, is going to be within our web courses tab. So please make sure you visit that and read through all of the instructions for making sure you have access to these for week 1. This slide is just going to cover our basic course objectives. And again, what we're looking for this class is for you to understand how energy and metabolism works and functions, and then how do we utilize that information to create synergistic goals and create good strategies for helping individuals meet their nutritional needs. If you're looking for a good summation of what the evaluation is like for the entire course, just laid out on one slide in front of you, this is going to be it. So over the course, there's going to be approximately 746 points available to you, 150 points for each exam. There'll be a syllabus acknowledgement quiz, which make sure you do that as soon as possible. That's how you're going to be able to get your financial aid released to you. We're then going to have activities that are called Connect SmartBook activities. There'll be 11 SmartBook activities over the course of the class, and each of them are going to be worth 10 points. We will have one comprehensive semester project worth 125 points. Each week where there's not an exam or we have a scheduled holiday or additional activity, there'll be an online quiz, and each of those quizzes is going to be worth 10 points. There is a couple knowledge assessments that just allow me to kind of gauge where you're at prior to the course, and then at the end, there'll be an orientation module through Connect with McGraw-Hill, and then an introduction discussion. Additionally, there'll be 5 different opportunities for participation activities across the course, and each of those activities are going to be worth 80 points. On this slide, we're going to see my letter grade evaluations. Right out the gates, I want you guys to be aware of what each grade is and how you can get that grade. This shouldn't be a question, or you shouldn't be coming to me with questions on, do I have an A, do I have a B? Just review the slide, go back to the syllabus. All of this is laid out in our web courses. At the end of the semester, I do tend to round. However, that is not going to be a given. So if you have an 89.5, I generally tend to round up to an A. However, depending on how the semester is going, that's up to my discretion. And this is the solid letter grade evaluations that I'll be using this semester. I'm now just going to go through a couple of our assignments and some of the things that you can earn points on and give a little bit more details about this. All of this information, again, can be found within the syllabus. I recommend you read through it. These slides are not comprehensive of all of the policies for each of the assignments, but they are a good generalization. So again, there will be 2 exams in this course. There'll be an exam 1, which is going to consist of content from modules 1 to 5, and then an exam 2, which is going to be essentially your final, and that's going to cover content from modules 6 to 11. So the final exam is not going to be comprehensive, but it will take place during our scheduled final exam slot. All of the exams will be multiple choice, and no notes, resources, or assistance of any kind are going to be permitted on any of these exams. Additionally, all of our exams will be given during our registered lecture section in person. So these are going to be in-person exams. They will not be online. And failure to take an exam during our section of the class, so that's 10:30 on Tuesday mornings, will result in a 0 for an exam. All exams will require the use of scored Scantrons, and my Scantron policy is below. I know that you can get some free Scantrons from one of the university offices, so I recommend you do that sooner rather than later. And we will be using the pink raspberry Scantrons. And for more information on this, again, go to the syllabus. I've linked everything in there and where you can find those Scantrons. Additionally, you'll need to provide me with the 2 Scantrons prior to our first exam. So by February 21st, I need 2 Scantrons from every single person. If you do not submit your Scantrons to me by the first exam, your exam grade will be reduced by 10%. I'm not going to be providing Scantrons to you. You need to bring your own Scantron to the exam. Additionally, you have to be on time for all exams. Anybody who is late will only be allowed access to the exam at my discretion, and you will not be provided with any extra time for arriving late. So if you arrive late and you are able to take the exam, or I permit you to take the exam, you will not be provided with any extra time for that exam. And then just make sure that you're bringing the following items to each exam. If you've never taken a Scantron exam, you'll need all of these items in order to properly fill out those Scantrons and complete them efficiently and effectively. So the McGraw-Hill Connect SmartBook activities, there will be 11 of these across the entire semester, are essentially designed in order to provide you with some opportunities to get familiar with some content before we dive into it in a much greater or more detailed sense. So these activities are going to be due the night before the lecture that will cover similar material. Each of these activities are worth 10 points, and they're there to allow you to essentially demonstrate your understanding of the content, and we're not going to actually test on the material within the SmartBook. However, they are completion points essentially, so if you go through and you do the work that's associated with moving through the SmartBook activity and the learning activities that go with them, you will receive full points for those activities. I recommend that you get in and you do this earlier in the week, so if there's any technical difficulties, you can address those earlier rather than later. McGraw-Hill does have a 24/7 helpline that you can call if you're having issues with them, but I will not be able to assist you in fixing any technical problems with this, only if there's an issue with, say, your grades not transferring from SmartBook into web courses. So again, make sure that you're interacting with these Connect activities earlier in the week so you're not scrambling around on Sunday or Monday trying to figure out why it's not working. But again, these are just supposed to be adaptive reading experiences that allow you to essentially figure out where your strengths and weaknesses are with the specific material we're covering that week. So as I mentioned before, there will be some online quizzes in this course. There's going to be 11 of those quizzes, which essentially correspond with our lectures across the entire semester. There will not be a quiz on a week where an exam is being given, or there is a project presentation, or we're off for a holiday, that type of a thing. So each of these online quizzes is going to consist of about 10 to 20 multiple choice questions that will be based on the course content. That course content is going to come from our in-person lectures or our online lectures. They will not be pulled from the SmartBook activities. So the main point of these is for you to be able to essentially help you learn the material that we're covering in class along the way. So each of these quizzes are going to be open books. You'll have access to being able to use your notes, use the lectures, listen to the re-recordings again. However, you're only going to have one attempt to take the quiz, and the quizzes will be timed. So depending on the length of the quiz, so if it's only a 10-point quiz, you may have 15 or 20 minutes. If it's a longer quiz, you may have upwards of 30 minutes to complete them. So you do still need to be familiar with the material, but you will have access to utilizing your resources. Each quiz is going to be available for about 1 week to all students, and they'll open at 8 a.m. on Tuesdays, so just before lecture, and they'll close again on the following Monday at 11:59. So you'll have about 7 days to get those quizzes done. That being said, there's not going to be any extensions on quizzes, and there are no makeups or excused absences for missed quizzes. This is one of those policies that I don't really budge on. The only exception for this is if you are, say, in a hospital for longer than a week, you're sequestered for jury duty that prevented computer access, etc., and that would have to come with some documentation. So you're going to be responsible for knowing all of your quiz due dates, and those are all on web courses. All the due dates are posted well in advance, so if you miss a quiz, that's on you. You've had plenty of time to get it done. Technical difficulties are not an excuse for a missed quiz, as you will have had 7 days to do these quizzes. So as I previously mentioned again, there will be opportunities for active learning and participation activities. So over the course of the semester, there's going to be 10 in-person lecture and course periods. And over the course of these periods, I will provide approximately 5 active learning assignments or discussions or activities. You will receive points just for completing or participating in these activities, so whether that's a class discussion, an article review, or some type of game to have you interacting with the material, you will receive points just for participating in them. So in order to receive full credit for participation across the semester, you have to complete at least 4 of the 5 activities. So I will do 5, and you have to participate in at least 4 of them. These activities are not going to be posted in the syllabus in advance, and this is to encourage in-class lecture attendance. So you won't have a heads up that these are occurring. They will just occur whenever they happen, and in order to get points for them, you have to be there in class in person to get them. If you miss more than one of these activities, 20 points will be deducted from your participation grade. So in order to get your maximum amount of participation points, it's recommended that you attend all in-person classes or just miss one, that type of a thing. So again, there are participation points provided, and I believe in order to get an A in the class, you must attend at least 4 of the 5 activities, so 9 out of 10 lectures, essentially. So I'm going to briefly go over sort of our semester project, and we're going to talk about this in class as we go along. There's going to be some questions with this, and I'm more than happy to discuss them over email or talk about them next week when we have our in-person class. But for now, I'm just going to give a brief overview. So the main point of the semester project is to essentially create a personalized sport nutrition program for a specific athlete. This is essentially one large case study, and this is going to be a group project. So about 5 to 6 students are going to essentially work together to develop a personalized nutritional program for an athlete, and you guys will have the opportunity to pick that athlete and your groups. So to start out, you're essentially going to perform a sort of review of the sport. You're going to design and develop an athlete energy profile, and then you're going to complete different pieces of a case study that pertain to your athlete, and you're going to present all of your findings in this paper format. At the end of the semester, you're going to take all of that information from your paper and you're going to do an in-person presentation to your peers. That's going to last approximately 10 to 15 minutes. This presentation is essentially going to mimic how you would indicate to your athlete the program you've developed, why you're making the decisions you're making, and how they can take the information and utilize that to optimize their performance. All of the athletes and the scenarios are going to be selected from a pre-approved list from me, and I'll have that in class next week so you guys can see the athletes and we can start to decide which ones you're going to want to use in these cases. Everybody's going to be allowed to essentially assign themselves to a presentation group next week on Tuesday, January 17th. So in class, we will finalize our groups. You'll finalize which athlete you want, and then we will begin the process of working on this program. If you're going to be missing class next week, please let me know in advance so I can assign you to a group. If you are in class and you don't know anybody, this is going to be a good opportunity to sort of get to know some of your classmates and maybe find some like-minded individuals who want to look at and develop a profile for a similar or the same athlete. So what are the criteria and guidelines for this project? So each group is going to be assessed according to the quality and the context of the assignment subcomponents that are going to be included on this checklist. So the first piece is going to be the synopsis of the athlete's energy profile, their sport, and then the related energy demands of that sport, and that's going to be about 15 points. Now the bulk of the points for this specific project are going to come from the case study sections. So we have case study sections 1 to 4, and that's going to be worth 30 points, and then we have case study sections 5 to 8, and again, those are going to be worth 30 points. Additionally, there's going to be an original presentation. Again, I mentioned that's going to occur at the end of the semester, and that presentation is going to be worth 25 points. Last but not least, there's going to be a group member participation evaluation. So each person in the group is going to complete this assignment feedback survey, rating each one of their group members, and you're going to receive the average of your group members' rating. So if you, on average, score 8 points overall from your group members, you'll receive 8 points on that section of the project. In order for an individual student to actually receive all of the points earned from the 125 points for the actual project and presentation, they have to have completed and participated in each part of the assignment. So if you choose not to complete the feedback survey, you will receive a 0 out of 125 points for the project, regardless of the amount of points that are earned on the other parts of the assignment. So on each piece of the assignment, you will need to take charge of one piece and be involved in that piece, and you'll indicate that on your project. If it's reported to me at the end of the semester that you didn't participate in case study sections 1 to 4, you will receive a 0 for the entire assignment, regardless of what you completed on other pieces of the project. Additionally, there's going to be 15 essentially free points that are given for different section draft submissions. So there'll be 3 different checkpoints across the whole semester where you'll submit the drafts of your different portions of the project, and these will just be simply marked as incomplete or complete. So if you turn it in on time and I can see your working information, you'll receive 5 points. This is so that I can provide you with some feedback and comments that will allow you to edit your work for your final submission. So to give you some active feedback on pieces where maybe we're missing something, or maybe you haven't considered this part of the profile, I will provide all of that information and feedback to you as we go along the semester so that you can correct it and add as needed in order to get the best or the highest amount of points possible on your final paper and presentation. So I will provide you with active feedback whenever you'd like it, but at minimum, I will provide it at these 3 different points across the semester. So diving a little bit more into what is this nutrition program paper, this slide is just going to give a brief summation of sort of the basics that we're looking for. If you flip through the semester project module in web courses, you'll find much more detailed information, or I provided you with guidelines, things that you need to include in each section, that type of a thing. But section 1 is just going to consist of your athlete's energy profile, review of their sport and the related energy demands of that sport. So you will need to do a couple different things. You'll have to review some original research articles, and all of those articles should be formatted in APA 7th edition format. If you're not familiar with what an original research article is or how to search for those things, the library has really great resources. Additionally, I am always available to help either during office hours or before or after class. There is an entire section located within the Begin Here module of our web courses that shows you how to find original research and how to read it and how to cite that. So again, I recommend you review the resources I've provided to you in your web courses, and if those are still not helping out, reach out for more assistance or some of the other additional resources that the university has. The second piece of that, again, is you're going to be defining your athlete's demographics, their training status, and their training volume. I sort of let you guys take the charge on this and get a little creative with it, so you have a little bit more of a personalization of the athlete in the scenario that you are designing a program for. So in the past, some individuals have done a semi-professional football quarterback who is in their off season, who's training for strength, that type of a thing. Or we've seen in-season marathon runners who are prepping for a 50-mile race. So there is some flexibility and some ability for you to be a little bit more creative in this section. And what you decide to do here will help determine how you complete the section 2 of all of the case studies. So the section 2, or the different case study sections, are seen below here. So on each of these, you're going to essentially personalize these sections to your athlete. So the first set, sections 1 to 4, are going to consist of the energy demands of the athlete. So we're going to actually learn how to calculate their basal metabolic rate, their energy expenditure, and get a good idea of what their caloric demands truly look like. From there, we're going to go through and do our carbohydrates, our protein, and our fat requirements of our athlete, and why we would choose the values that we chose, what are the food recommendations, what are the snacks we would recommend here, what's the energy density of these different macronutrients. So as we move through the semester, this information will be presented in class, and you can take that concept and then apply it to your athlete. In the second half of the semester, so our sections essentially 5 to 8 are going to consist of our fluid requirements, our supplementation strategies, any dietary considerations and cultural concerns, and then finally you're going to wrap it up with actually creating a one-day meal plan for either a training or a competition day, depending on which athlete and scenario you have chosen. So again, we're going to cover this material in class, and then you're going to be able to take that and actually apply it to your athlete as the semester moves along. So we're doing essentially a learning in-class experience and then an applied experience, which you may be posed with in the real world once you're out of this course. And last but not least, once you've completed creating this awesome nutrition program for your athlete, you're going to need to present that to us as your athlete. So essentially, you're going to take all of the materials that you used in creating this nutritional program paper and create a Microsoft PowerPoint show that you will then present in class. Each student within the group is going to be required to present a portion of the project in order to receive full credit, and then each student is going to be able to evaluate the level of participation again using that project feedback survey. I've also presented some basic presentation rules that we'll be expecting you guys to follow over the course of the presentations, and is in each group member has to participate and do an equal portion of the work. However, all group members will be evaluated collectively for the presentation, so the group is only going to be as strong as the weakest link, but you can note any issues you have on that feedback survey. And again, as we get closer to the presentation dates, we'll discuss what that's going to look like in a little bit greater detail over the semester. I'm now going to cover some things that are in the syllabus online. So these are some of our course policies that I expect you guys to be familiar with over the course of the semester. And if you have any issues, these are, again, found within the syllabus in our modules on web courses. But I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the ones that come up a little bit more frequently. So first off, communicating with your professor. So generally, I can answer quite a few questions over email, that type of a thing. However, if you're looking for just general questions regarding, say, the course schedule, exam times, due dates, grading scales, that type of a thing, please make sure that you guys actually look at web courses before you contact me directly, because most of these questions can be answered by just reviewing the materials that I've provided to you already. However, if you have more pressing issues such as an absence, a missed exam, a grade, that type of a thing, please email me directly. However, It's very important that you guys don't wait. And if you have a question or a concern or an issue, you email me as soon as you know so we can set up a time to either meet in person or to meet virtually. Now, generally, I'm a pretty relaxed person, but when it comes to emails and web courses and whatnot, please make sure that you actually send me emails exclusively from your UCF email account. I will not be able to address emails that are sent to me from your personal Gmails or Yahoo emails or whatever it is. Please make sure you only send that to my web courses email or from your student email. Additionally, please make sure that you're typing in your name and the course number. I have quite a few students across multiple classes, so just make sure that you're telling me who you are and which class you're from so I can better assist you. And then just be a little bit respectful and responsible with how you're addressing your emails. If you need to book an appointment, please provide some opportunities or some timeframes that you'd be available so we can get that done quite quickly. Additionally, if you have any questions about the material, that type of a thing, feel free to reach out. I love talking about the material in this class. I'm really passionate about this. So I'd love to talk your ear off about whatever it is you may have questions about or you may be confused about. However, when it comes to actually discussing grades, I cannot discuss grades with you over email. If you have an issue with a grade or some part of a project, that type of a thing, you need to email me to set up a time to discuss in person. There will be no grade discussion over emails or web courses chat. It has to be done in person or via, say, a Zoom call. Additionally, I tend to be available quite frequently during the semester from about 9 to 5 on Mondays to Fridays. I'll make every effort to get back to your email within about 24 to 48 hours. However, I have several commitments, so sometimes there may be a little bit of an exception on this. Additionally, if you email me after 5 p.m. or on the weekends, there is a high possibility I will not respond to you until the next business day during those office hours that I've posted about. So if you email me on a Sunday night when there's an assignment due, don't expect an email back. It may not happen until Monday morning, and you may just be stuck with whatever problem it was. Additionally, I provided all of the resources for web courses, IT help, McGraw-Hill IT help, all within the web courses tabs. So if you're having a technical difficulty, I definitely can help you. I'm not a computer person, so make sure that you reach out to those individuals who will better be able to assist you. The next policy I'm going to talk about is going to be our assignment deadlines. So all deadlines are clearly established in our course schedule and within the SmartBook activities and web courses. All assignments are going to be due on the date and time assigned. There's no exceptions. Generally, if there is a problem, I need to know as soon as possible so that arrangements can be made. And then if there is, say, an extreme circumstance, say a car accident, a immediate death in the family, documentation of those circumstances may be required. But keep in mind that all of my assignments tend to be open for a minimum of about 6 to 7 days, if not longer, say our semester project, which is the whole semester or multiple weeks or months. That being said, I will not give any assignment extensions on these items. You will have 7 days. I'm very firm on that. There's no excuses for late work or missing work when it comes to these assignments that have been open for multiple days. So continuing on these course deadlines, which are your responsibility to be aware of, I recommend, again, checking web courses regularly and making sure that you are aware of what those deadlines are. I don't accept late assignments. I'm under no obligation to provide you with any acceptance of a late assignment. If I do accept a late assignment, which again typically doesn't happen, the assignment will lose at least 5 points from the original final grade for each day late, and that's going to include weekends. So if you miss a deadline and you submit something and I do decide to accept it, you will lose points for each day those are late. However, prior arrangements can be made with me if you anticipate, say, difficulty meeting a due date because of family or health concerns. When it comes to missed exams and quizzes, there will be no makeup or extensions for any course activity or exam without prior documentation of, say, a medical excuse or notice, or a university-sponsored event, religious observance, or legal obligation prior to the exam date. It's completely at my discretion, the format of a makeup exam. So our current exam format is in-person multiple choice. Say I do allow you to have a makeup exam, maybe that's going to end up being a long answer essay response. It really depends if one is offered or necessary. If you miss a activity or an exam without any prior notification, again, 24 hours prior to the exam, it will result in a 0, and job or other work-related absences are not considered a valid excuse for missing an exam. Our in-person exam dates are on the calendar right now, the first day of class. Make sure you book those days off, because missing that class will result in a 0 for your exam, even if you have work. It's not an excuse. So the last policy I'm going to bring up here is our academic integrity policy. So generally, cheating and integrity issues can include everything on the following list here, but they're not limited to this list. So generally, people think of cheating or integrity as, say, copying from another student's exam, or signing in for another student for a participation activity, or falsifying information such as absence notes or doctor's notes. However, ones that individuals may not be aware of is, say, refusing to comply with some core syllabus policies, or having aggressive behavior, stalking between classmates or instructors, that type of a thing. So make sure that you are being an authentic human being who is not cheating in this course, because the course and university sanctions will be acted upon. I do not tolerate cheating in my courses, and you will end up with a 0 for either the course or the assignment or the quiz or whatever it is. Make sure that you are doing all of your work on your own, following the policies that are laid out within the syllabus. Again, cheating or integrity issues are not tolerated, and I will report them immediately for action at the university. So that being said, how should you contact me if you have any questions? Well, first off, my office/desk is going to be located in the education complex in room 174B, and I'm in the exercise physiology intervention and collaboration lab. Typically, I'm there from 8 a.m. to about 4 or 5 p.m. or 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It really depends. Feel free to swing by, but there's absolutely no guarantee that I'll have the time to actually sit and meet with you if you just stop in unannounced. That being said, I recommend you reach out to set up an office hours appointment with me, and I can do those either virtual over Zoom or face-to-face, and just send me an email or a message on WebCourse. So that being said, my email is here on this page, and again, allow about 24 to 48 hours for a response. And if you want to get a hold of me a little bit faster, typically the WebCourse's messaging system will provide me with the fastest notification of you wanting to contact me. So that would be my first recommendation. And then if I don't respond in the 24 to 48 hours, please feel free to send me an additional email just as a follow-up. Say, hey, not sure if you saw my previous message or email, but this is my follow-up type thing. I tend to be pretty quick on the emails and the messaging system, but again, just be patient with that, and I would love to see you guys in office hours so we can talk about more of the content or other opportunities at the university. So moving away from all the boring course policies, I just wanted to give you guys a little introduction to who I am. So again, my name is going to be Jessica Moon, and I'm originally from Northern Alberta, Canada, which is like a big sort of province above Montana. It's very cold, and I'm very happy to be here in Florida. I completed my bachelor's degree at Lindenwood University in Belleville, Illinois, where I completed a degree in exercise science and completed a couple projects relating to, say, sports nutrition, and body composition. And while I was there, I played on the university's women's ice hockey team, so I was a student athlete, going through a similar program as you guys, so I understand how crazy a bachelor's degree can be, especially in a sciences course, so I am familiar with this lifestyle. Once I completed my bachelor's degree, I moved on to Lindenwood University in St. Louis, Missouri, where I completed a Master's of Science in Health Sciences with a specialty in performance and nutrition. Once I completed my master's degree there, I stayed on and worked as a full-time research assistant in the Exercise and Performance Nutrition Laboratory, where I worked on my master's thesis there and did work related to, say, body composition and metabolism. And then finally, I ended up down here at UCF, where I'm currently completing my PhD in kinesiology. So go Knights. So what am I really doing here at UCF? What's my research? So typically my research interests and passions lie around exercise metabolism and sport nutrition and supplements performance. Additionally, I work a little bit in exercise recovery and exercise and cognitive function, particularly with how that relates to cellular exercise physiology. So currently I'm working on some projects looking at different cognitive function assessments and how those can be impacted by training, or how exercise just impacts those basic measures of cognitive function. I will be moving more into some sport nutrition and exercise metabolism projects here in the next year or so. So if you're interested in participating in some research, please feel free to check out some of our labs. So I do work in 2 labs here on campus. The primary one you can find me at is going to be the EPIC lab. So that's the Exercise Physiology Intervention and Collaboration Lab. And I know several of you guys have probably completed projects in the kinesiology department, so you may have seen my face around there. But if you're curious and want to check out some of our work, feel free to stop by or check us out on our website. Additionally, I work across campus in the biology department as well in the cellular exercise physiology lab. And this is where we actually look at isolating different monocyte populations to see how they're impacted by different exercise regimens, or how a supplement can impact how your white blood cells respond after exercise or after damaging exercise, and that type of a thing. So that's definitely more of a little bit more of a wet lab situation where we spend a lot of our times with our heads in microscopes and looking at different cells. So I kind of swing both directions on the research scale, from more of an applied setting where we're looking at actual how somebody's body composition is training, to then looking at how somebody's cells are reacting to that same training stimulus. So if you have any questions about research, or you're looking to get involved with it, either as, say, a research assistant or as a participant, or you're just curious how you can get more involved in this area or check it out, get some experience with it, please feel free to reach out to me. I can talk about it after class, during class. It doesn't really matter to me, but if you are interested, please let me know. I'd love to talk to you more about it. And then finally, on more of a personal note, I am a human being and I do have some people and animals in my life that I love dearly. So I have a husband, Zachary, who is from St. Louis, and we just recently got married about a year and a half ago. So we're very happy. And then we also have a 4-year-old orange tabby cat named Mufasa. I'm sure you guys will see more pictures of him across the semester. He's super lovable buddy. And I hope that you guys enjoy at least seeing his face around a little bit. Additionally, I am an exercise scientist, which means I have a huge passion for different sports and activities. And these 3 teams that are on this slide are the ones that break my heart every single season. So I'm a big Oilers hockey fan, a Cardinals baseball fan, and a Colts football fan. So if you guys want to talk any smack about those teams, go for it. I'm open to it. I'll probably talk smack right back with you. If you don't know what those teams are, that's totally okay too. I have additional hobbies or passions that we could discuss or talk about. I'm generally pretty open with what I enjoy doing, and hope to inspire you guys to share your passions and get to know you a little bit better as well. All right, now that we have gotten all the introductions and class information out of the way, we're actually going to dive into sort of a brief overview of what you should know or be aware of and be familiar with the semester. This information will help you sort of understand foundational concepts a little bit more as we move into more complex topics. So let's get started. So the key goals for this class should be able to apply nutrition knowledge to a couple different scenarios. The first is to create practical daily eating plans focused on providing fuel for physical activity. To apply this nutrition knowledge to facilitate the repair and rebuilding process associated with exercise. To optimize athletic performance to promote overall health and wellness, and then to place this knowledge into an appropriate context. And by placing it into an appropriate context, I mean to understand the goals of the individual you're working with, whether their goals are health or performance, or whether or not they're physique versus performance, because those two goals are drastically different. And as we sort of progress across the class, we're going to talk a lot about the difference between a health goal and a performance goal, or a physique goal and a performance goal. So when we talk about physical performance, a lot of the times we look at it as this grandeur sort of feat of strength. But what is physical performance really? Now, yes, physical performance can be an elite marathoner who is running for, 2 to 2.5 hours, running 5-minute miles for 26 miles. It could be a professional powerlifter like John Hack, who totaled over 2,000 pounds as a 200-pound athlete. Now, performance could also be, your everyday Jane or Joe who just wants to be able to work at their job without taking a break for, say, 4 hours. That's their baseline. They want to work for 4 hours, take a break, work for another 4 hours. It could be a weekend runner, somebody who just wants to be able to run a 5K in, say, 30 minutes. But then if we look at that, on the other hand, we have our world records for men and women who are running 60-second laps for 12.5 laps. And then on the far spectrum, we have our elderly individuals whose physical performance goals may look like being able to walk, say, 50 feet in under 30 seconds, or sit up from an armchair without needing to hold on to a handrail, or get into the shower without having to have assistance. So our performance and our physical performance can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes, and we're going to look at that in a lot more detail as we move along here. So to divide our physical performance into a couple different categories, we have the following sort of definitions. We have our physical performance as an athletic, competitive, recreational performance. This could happen in running, hockey, weightlifting, football, soccer. It's a lot of individuals who are looking at physical performance as a metric of the sport or activity they're performing. We have our physical activities, so our ADLs. These are our non-athletic tasks. That's like walking your dog, unloading the groceries from the car. Those can be measures of physical performance. And then finally, we have our physical performance defined as a capacity using a performance test. And this can be done in a laboratory or a field test for fitness, say using a 1 repetition maximum, a VO2 max, a vertical jump, or a broad jump value. Or these performance tests can be very task specific, often related to their jobs. So a good example of this is going to be, say, the fire department has a physical performance capacity assessment or a performance test that requires them to drag a weighted dummy, pull a hose up a ladder, move certain pieces of equipment around, that sort of a thing. There's also tests for, say, jobs like window washing that requires tests of balance, where they need to stand on rungs of a ladder for a certain duration of time, holding certain pieces of equipment to make sure that these physical performance values are being met for a safe workplace. So that sort of brings us to understanding our scope of practice. So before you guys get all this information and you take it and you run with it, it's important to understand what your scope of practice is and how you fit into the world of strength conditioning or nutrition or performance, and what your information of nutrition could be used for. So on this slide here, I've included a link to the state of Florida's website that sort of goes over what information can and can't be used or utilized in different formats. So it's just a fun little click on if you're interested in looking at it. But the main sort of topic that I want to talk about is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist. So our dietitian, also an RDN, a CSSD, those different sort of titles that these individuals can have, but a dietitian is a medical dietitian and are experts in identifying and treating disease-related malnutrition and in conducting medical nutrition therapy. So these individuals are licensed, they've gone through years of schooling, they've taken state and national, federal board exams, and they have the information to work with our medical or nutrition therapy populations. An RDN is also known as a registered dietitian nutritionist, can hold extra credentials such as the CSSD, which is a certified specialist in sports dietetics, and this allows them to provide safe, effective, evidence-based strategies for health, fitness, and athletic performance. So it's sort of an extra layer of training that they get in order to work with this athletic population in an appropriate manner. So we say we have our dietitians who are, medically trained, and we have our nutritionists, which is sort of a broad term. So what really makes a nutritionist? Well, like, the nutrition profession is not really protected under the law like a dietitian. In fact, nutritionists that do not intend to use the titles of dietitian or registered dietitians are free from all government regulation for the most part. So this status of being a nutritionist is very low. There's not really a bar that you need to meet to be labeled a nutritionist. However, some states do require nutritionists, or those who wish to use the term nutritionist, to obtain an occupational license from the Board of Nutrition, which is the governing body of nutrition and dietetic sciences. And then other states allow individuals to just practice as nutritionists without any education, training, or work experience. So it's important when we're looking at individuals who say they're nutritionists to examine their credentials. What is their history? What is their education? What information are they sharing with the world? And is that truly evidence-based? Now, the ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine, has a really great article that talks about the difference between dietitians and nutritionists and how those terms and individuals are commingling in the workforce we have right now. But the information that I want to share with you guys is sort of about crossing a line that maybe nutritionists or those working in a sport and fitness world shouldn't cross, or were kind of towing a line that maybe they shouldn't. And the first sort of case that I want to talk about here is the Capitae versus Crunch Fitness. So this case was heard in a court, and it involved a personal trainer who allegedly advised his client, who was taking a prescription medication for hypertension, to take dietary supplements that contained ephedra. So if we know anything about ephedra, well, we know that that is pretty lethal if you're struggling with hypertension or lower high blood pressure. So what happened in this case is that the individual began taking these supplements. It had ephedra in it while they were working out at the club one day under the personal trainer. The client was really sick and actually died of a brain hemorrhage at the hospital. As a result, the family actually filed a $320 million wrongful death claim against the defendant, defendant's personal trainer, the club, and other individuals in the field, including the vitamin shop industries that sold those products. So just because your state does not have any sort of licensing around using this nutritionist title doesn't mean that by using this information or prescribing information in a incorrect manner can't lead to any sort of damages. Our second example here is sort of the new hot topic of talking about nutrition influencers and these individuals who are using social media to share their nutrition information. Some of you may have heard of this, but in the state of Texas is currently bringing a case towards Brittany Dawn. So Brittany Dawn was a health and fitness influencer online who actually did advising for clients with eating disorders. She provided sort of nutrition plans and personalized nutrition information. What was actually found is that she was advising individuals who suffered with eating disorders like anorexia to go on these sort of low-calorie diets and advise them to lose even more weight through these nutritional plans, which once we get a little bit more in depth into this in the semester, we know is not really a smart move to be doing with that population. And it was found that she was in fact working outside of her scope of practice and should not have been doing this. So again, if you look at the slide, there is a ACSM blog post that covers everything in a lot kind of more superficial, bite-sized pieces of information. If you're not interested in reading the full ACSM article, I recommend the blog post as sort of a nice smaller piece that sums it all up anyways. But if you don't have an RDN, if you're not a dietitian, you're not going to school to be an RDN, and you're not sure if you want to use nutrition in the future, there are different sort of nutrition certifications that are recognized as having some form of merit to their name. And the first one is going to be the ISSN SNS Certified Sports Nutritionist. That's through the International Society of Sports Nutrition. It's considered to be one of the hardest sports nutritionist certifications on the market. We have like NASMs, ISSA, and you see the rest of them here below on the list that I've linked out. These are all good little certifications if you're looking to improve your nutritional background, or essentially prove that you have some form of an education in this. However, to sum up this slide, I just wanted to give away 3 main takeaways here. And the first should be that exercise professionals need to know where to draw the line when assisting clients with nutrition and diet-related questions and goals. So individuals who have eating disorders, that's not really our general public physically active group. Therefore, maybe their nutrition questions are more geared towards, say, a registered dietitian who has extensive education in working with those medically assisted populations. The second is that people who engage in the practice of nutrition and dietetics when they are not licensed can potentially face legal consequences if they are not following appropriate guidelines or putting individuals at risk. And finally, this is sort of the main take home and why we're focusing a lot on physically active individuals as we move through this course. We're going to focus on generally healthy individuals, is that exercise professionals should provide only general non-medical nutrition education to clients. So again, medically needed nutrition advice should be referred to a dietitian, and the rest of us should stick to our generally healthy population with the nutrition knowledge we do have. So that brings me to our nutrition. Well, the simple definition of nutrition is the total of processes of ingestion, digestion, absorption, and metabolism of food, and then the assimilation and incorporation of nutrient materials into the tissues. That's the broad picture of nutrition, and encompasses all of these categories, and we'll move through these categories over the semester in a lot more detail, starting with ingestion and digestion in the coming week. So to start off, what's a nutrient? Well, a nutrient is going to be a substance found in a food that performs one or more specific functions in the body. That being said, we eat food, not nutrients, but the food we eat contains nutrients. So that may sound a little silly, but it's important to understand that we're not consuming nutrients, we consume food, and food can be utilized and broken down into nutrients we can then utilize. So to start, we're going to go over a couple main questions here. So what are the 6 nutrients, the main nutrients? We have our carbohydrates, our fat, protein, water, vitamins, and minerals. Alcohol is often also considered to be a nutrient. However, since it is non-essential in the diet, we don't include that in our main categories of nutrients. Nutrients are these life-sustaining things that we need. Our second question is going to be, what are the common categories of nutrients? Well, we have 3 common categories, and all of the nutrients that we utilize can be put into one of these 3 categories. The first is going to be our promotion of growth and development. And protein, for example, can fall into this category as it's required for tissue growth and repair. Calcium and phosphorus can fall into this category as well, as they're needed for skeletal growth and development. Our second category is going to be the provision of energy. And the 2 nutrients that fall primarily into this are going to be carbohydrates and fat. And protein on very rare occasions can also fall into this category, but it's not a primary fuel source. And our last category is going to be the regulation of metabolism. This category is going to sort of encompass vitamins, minerals, and protein. So protein make enzymes, and enzymes are going to be the catalyst for different metabolic reactions. For example, we have phosphorylase, which breaks down carbohydrate stores. We have hemoglobin, which is a complex polypeptide chain of protein that transports O2 to the tissues from the lungs. And then finally, our vitamins and minerals step in as they're required for the synthesis of more complex enzymes for greater metabolic processes. So our vitamins, minerals, and proteins are going to be the ones that regulate our metabolism. So what are macronutrients? Our macronutrients to start off, and as we progress again, we're going to go into these in a lot more detail over the semester, but just as a brief overview, we have our carbohydrate, our fat, and our protein. Water also falls into a macronutrient category. However, we measure that a little bit differently than we would our other three. And now that we've talked about macronutrients, we're going to talk a little bit about micronutrients. So micronutrients are going to be vitamins and minerals. Vitamins are organic compounds, and there are 13 known vitamins. These vitamins must be obtained from the diet. There's no other way to get vitamins. We have to consume them. However, there are two exceptions to this rule, vitamin D and K. So vitamin D, once again, the skin creates from interacting with the sun, and vitamin K is actually synthesized through the small intestine. Minerals, on the other hand, and trace elements are actually inorganic compounds, and minerals can be broken down into two categories. Our macro minerals that have recommended dietary intakes of larger than or greater than 100 milligrams or 0.01% of an individual's body weight. And those macro minerals are going to be our sodium, calcium, and our potassium. We also have micro minerals, which are known as the trace elements. The trace elements have a recommended dietary intake of less than 100 milligrams or that 0.01% of body weight. And some examples of our trace minerals are going to be chromium, zinc, selenium, those guys. And again, we'll get into these in a lot more detail over the course of the semester. This is just a brief overview. And finally, it's important to sort of compare our micro versus our macronutrients. So what really are the difference? Well, to start, our macronutrients are going to be our carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, and these are going to be our main source of energy for the body. The biggest difference is that we classify them as needed in grams per day, and then our micronutrients, we actually say that we need them in micrograms per day. And our micronutrients have no effect on our energy sources for the body. They're not sources of energy, but they are essential to maintaining health. Now that we talked a little bit about micronutrients and macronutrients, I want to bring up a sort of an interesting subcategory called phytonutrients. So our phytonutrients are non-nutrients, interesting play on words there, that are found in plants with health-promoting effects. So these health-promoting effects can include cancer prevention, they're antioxidants, they could improve immune function, they could work to help improve cell communication, and some examples of these are going to be our carotenoids, which are found in, say, carrots and broccoli, so our colorful vegetables. We also have polyphenols, which are found in our berries, fruit, and wine. And we're going to talk a little bit more about polyphenols near the end of the semester when we get into our sport supplementation group. And we also have phytonutrients such as flavonoids and ligands and terpenes and all of these other ones that are listed there on the slide. So now that we've talked about the different types of nutrients, we're going to talk about the intake of nutrients. So nutrients can be classified as either being essential or non-essential. Our essential nutrients are ones that we cannot synthesize in our body. So these are ones that we need to consume through different food sources, and these include water, protein, and linoleic acid. And then we have our non-essential nutrients, which can be synthesized by the body and are not required to be consumed. And some examples of this are going to be cholesterol, vitamin D, alanine, arginine, those guys. Alternatively, our essential and non-essential nutrients can be called indispensable or dispensable nutrients, which is just another sort of definition that the nutrition industry can use to determine whether or not something is needed or not needed. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of essential nutrients. So back when Hippocrates was kicking around, he figured out that there were some food sources that humans just needed to live longer and healthier lifestyles. And at this point, they weren't really sure why. They were just like, we need that food, so we're going to consume that food. Moving a little bit later down the line, as we started to have individuals going out and exploring the world, we had the discovery of scurvy. And at this point, they were able to sort of pinpoint more specifically what a nutrient was within a food that they needed. So they knew that they needed oranges because oranges offered, say, vitamin C that prevented scurvy, which was a deficiency in vitamin C in the body. Moving on from there, individuals start to gain a little bit more interest in the scientific practice of discovering what these essential nutrients are. And unfortunately, quite a bit of work was done in Nazi death camps where they withheld different dietary foods from different prisoners. They watched what happened. They recorded the adverse events. They then replenished the diet with certain foods to be able to determine what nutrients were in fact increasing longevity or reducing those symptoms. From there, scientists decided to be a lot more practical with it and move into rodent studies, in which they would do sort of a similar thing where they would study rodents lacking certain nutrients in their diet, see how they responded, and then reintroduce that food. And that sort of brings us to today, where we have a better understanding of which nutrients are essential, which ones are non-essential, and how we actually receive those food sources in the diet. So what makes a nutrient essential? Well, the definition of an essential nutrient was really solidified by Harper et al. In 1999, and they gave the following criteria for determining whether or not a nutrient is essential. The nutrient had to be a substance that was required in the diet for growth, health, and survival. An absence or inadequate intake of that specific substance resulted in characteristic signs of deficiency, disease, and death. Growth failure and signs of deficiency are prevented only by the nutrient or a specific precursor of it, and not by any other substance. Below some critical level of intake of that substance, growth response and severity of signs of deficiency were proportional to the amount consumed. And then finally, the substance is not synthesized in the body and is therefore required for some critical function throughout life. And as of now, we have 40 essential nutrients that we need to consume within our body to prevent essentially the decline of health, growth, and our survival. So that brings me to sort of our conditionally essential and our indispensable nutrients. So this is a conditionally essential or a conditionally indispensable nutrient. And this term was actually introduced in 1984. And it essentially describes a nutrient that is normally not essential, that becomes essential under certain circumstances or conditions, and must be supplied endogenously. So an example of that is an individual who has a genetic defect in the synthesis of carnitine. Now, carnitine is a nutrient that supports the transportation of FFAs, which are our fatty free acids, into the mitochondria of the cell to be oxidized into energy. So when we don't have that, individuals with this defect actually experience myopathy, which is, a loss of muscle mass. And then when they're supplemented with the carnitine, the myopathy actually corrected. Therefore, in this situation, our carnitine is going to be a conditionally essential nutrient. So it would move from being, say, a non-essential nutrient to an essential nutrient. Another example of this would be surgical patients who are currently in the ICU. They have lower than normal plasma and muscle glutamine concentrations. And glutamine is a amino acid that is essential to protein synthesis. So that's the maintenance and recovery process associated with muscle mass. A deficit in these concentrations are associated with a negative nitrogen balance, a decreased protein synthesis, and an increased protein breakdown. This results in our muscle wasting. So improvements can be seen in this situation with supplementing with that glutamine. So if we supplement with glutamine, we then prevent a significant amount of muscle wasting in these patients. Another conditionally essential nutrient. So our current recommended intakes, what do we look at currently as our RDAs or RDIs? So currently our RDAs are focused on two specific categories. And the first is to prevent disease and deficiencies, and then to reduce the rate of diet-related chronic conditions. Now, RDAs are developed into specific recommendations for different ages, sex, and then different statuses of those sexes. For example, prenatal and lactating individuals have different RDAs for different nutrients depending on where they are. Now, as we sort of get more into the course, there's some different recommended intake terminology that you should be aware of. First off is our DRI, which is our dietary reference intake. And this is a new standard for nutrient recommendations to plan and assess diets for healthy people. It's an umbrella term that's going to include all of the rest of the following values. The first one being our estimated average requirement, which is our EAR. And this means that that value meets the requirement for 50% of healthy individuals. So this assesses nutritional adequacy of intakes of population groups, and we use that to then calculate RDAs. Our RDA is going to be a recommended dietary allowance, and it's a goal for individuals that are based on the EAR. So this is based on their estimated average requirement. The dietary intake level is sufficient to meet requirements of 97 to 98% of healthy people. If we didn't have an EAR, we would have no RDA essentially. We then have our AI, which is our adequate intake. And this is going to be used when there is no EAR or RDA. So this is a daily intake level based on observations of experimentally determined approximations of nutrient intake for a group of healthy people. So this is a value used when we don't have an RDA and we don't have an EAR. We also have our UL, which is going to be our tolerable upper intake level. This is the highest level of daily nutrient intake, likely to pose no risks of adverse health effects to almost all individuals. If our intake goes above the UL for a certain population or individual, a risk of adverse outcomes can go up. Finally, we have our AMDR, which is going to be our acceptable macronutrient distribution range. And this is a range of intake for a specific energy source, and it's often associated with reduced risks of chronic diseases and essential nutrients. So this is a value that we assign to chronic diseases and essential nutrients that helps keep us within a acceptable macronutrient range. So how do we monitor and analyze dietary intake? Well, we have two different methods for doing this, and the first is going to be prospective. So this means that we are actively recording our dietary intake as we consume food or at a daily basis. We're not recalling any information. We're sort of logging it as we go. And the first sort of sub-method we can use here is our 3 or 7 day dietary survey. And our dietary surveys essentially record all of the food consumed. So we could use, say, a MyFitnessPal to use this sort of monitoring technique. The next is a 3 or 7 day weighted food record, and this is sort of similar to a dietary survey. However, during this process, we also record the weight of all food consumed. So we would record the weight of, say, your bag of grapes, your container of carrots, your weight of your chicken burger, all of those different things we would actually weigh and record, as well as the types. And the last one is actually going to be a duplicated food collection. Now, personally, I've never seen this done, but it is a highly precise technique that requires individuals to actually save an identical food item, bring that food item into the lab, and then when they do a chemical analysis on the food to determine what's actually being consumed across this dietary collection period. The second method we have for monitoring and analyzing our dietary intake are more retrospective. So these are going to be things that we use to ask individuals about what they've been eating after they've already eaten it. So the first is going to be a 24-hour recall, and this is typically a questionnaire or an interview to assess the current intake of their food within the last 24 hours. Alternatively, you could do a 3-day recall, 4-day recall, but typically a 24-hour recall is what's performed in a lot of nutrition research. We then have a food frequency questionnaire, which is a series of questions or interviews to assess the frequency of different types of food and the intake of those different foods. And then a diet history is sort of a combination of our hourly recall and our food frequency history. Now, all of these different methods have different pros and cons. Some are more precise than others. Some catch missing data points. Say a dietary survey might catch that an individual was eating out more at different restaurants, at different types of foods, where they were prepared. However, a 24-hour recall may prompt an individual to say, oh yeah, I forgot I had ketchup with my fries, which is an example prompt that the ASA 24 dietary recall actually does give an individual. So in general, all of these methods can be used to monitor and analyze dietary intake with varying pros and cons of the different techniques based on the method. So that moves us into sort of our introduction to metabolism. Now, metabolism comes from the Greek word metabol, which means change. And as we sort of get more into this information, it's important to recognize that metabolism is essentially the set of life-sustaining chemical transformations or changes within the cells of living organisms. Alternatively, it can be the sum of all chemical reactions that occur in these living organisms, including the digestion and the transportation of substances into and between different cells. So changing those different substrates into other substrates or energy forms to be used by the cells. So the main purposes of our metabolism, there's 3 main purposes. The first is the conversion of food to energy for cellular processes. It's sort of the basic one that we understand, that we eat a food, it needs to be converted eventually to energy, and that's through different cellular processes via metabolism, right? Great. The second one is going to be the conversion of our food to different building blocks for, say, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, and even carbohydrates. And lastly, our metabolism is responsible for the elimination of metabolic waste that comes from all of these different processes. So why does examining exercise metabolism matter? Well, when we exercise, there is a change in the rate of which the 3 different functions of metabolism need to occur. This leads to unique changes in substrate utilization, energy creation, and metabolic waste clearance. So it's important to understand how exercise impacts metabolic reactions, how these baseline metabolic and initial reactions are occurring, and then how exercise changes and adapts these processes as it changes in intensity and duration. So let's talk about energy. Energy can be defined as the ability to produce change and is measured by the amount of work performed during a given change. The presence of energy is only revealed when a change occurs. Therefore, all physical activity in daily life and athletics are going to be energetic events. And if all of these activities and events are energetic events, it's important to understand what energy is, how it's acquired, how it's stored, how it's converted, and then how the body utilizes that energy to perform work. So to start, we need to go over the law of the conservation of energy. This law states that energy is neither created nor destroyed during physical or chemical processes. This means that energy exists in many forms and can be converted from one form to another. An example of this would be energy flowing in water. It can be converted to energy for a light bulb, like in a water mill or a windmill, that sort of a thing. So energy can go from the sun and a solar panel to power our lights. An example of this in the body is going to be when energy is obtained from energy-containing nutrients in food. So when we eat food, we eat the nutrients that come with that food. We then convert the nutrients to potential energy via metabolism and different metabolic processes, and we store that as our potential energy within our tissues. The potential energy in the tissues is then converted via cellular respiration to ATP, which is then used for a variety of different biological work. Think a muscle contraction, the synthesis of different molecules, and the transportation of other substances. In this manner, the body is simply transforming energy from one form to another, never synthesizing, producing, consuming, or using up their energy. It's simply just changing forms within the body. So what are the units of energy? Well, to start, we have the joule and the kilojoule, and these are units of work. The joule was named after a British scientist named Sir Prescott Joule, and the kilojoule is going to be defined as the amount of work required to move a 1 kilogram object 1 meter under the force of gravity. So again, these are measures of energetic work. And then if we look at our calories and our kilocalories, these are going to be units of heat. So we have our joule and our kilojoule, units of work, and our calories and kcals as units of heat. A kilocalorie is the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And in order to convert these, we can take 1 calorie, which equals 4.186 joules, or 1 kilocalorie, which equals 4.186 kilojoules. Now, typically, energy in food is represented as kcals or calories, primarily in the USA and Canada. So North America, they tend to typically use our calories and our kilocalories. That's what we're going to see on the back of our food labels, on our nutrition labels. That's what our dietary recommendations are going to suggest. However, in Europe and Asia, the joule or the kilojoule is actually the value that typically is used to represent the energy in fuel. So it's important to understand that if you're talking to athletes from different areas or different countries, that they may have different terminology for the units of energy for food. So we're going to talk a little bit about potential and kinetic energy and sort of what the definition of those two terms mean and how that fits into the greater picture of mechanical energy. So mechanical energy is going to be energy that powers muscular contractions. Some examples of activities that require muscular contractions are essentially any sort of sport movement, walking, running, throwing, jumping, anything like that. Mechanical energy is possessed by an object due to its motion, position, or internal structure. And this mechanical energy can be either kinetic or potential energy. An example of potential energy, which is defined as the energy of position, could be a book on a shelf. A book on a shelf has stored potential energy, or the stretching of a rubber band. When we stretch a rubber band, we are creating potential energy, as it's simply in a position to eventually utilize that energy. An example of kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion, could be a gymnast flipping, a turning on a beam, running, jumping over hurdles, anything that involves movement. Both of these forms of energy can exist simultaneously and are often converted from one to the other. An example of this would be the water in a waterfall. At the top of the waterfall, the water simply has potential energy. There is a potential for it to have energy. And then as the water begins to fall down the waterfall and move, it then has its kinetic energy. So it can flow between those two types of mechanical energy. An example of this within the human body or a biological system would be catabolism. So catabolism is the release of stored energy in nutrients, which leads to the potential energy being transformed to kinetic energy of motion. So catabolism takes a nutrient, it releases the potential energy of that nutrient to be used for motion or to be utilized to run a race. So it essentially becomes movement energy. Alternatively, we have the reverse process of biosynthesis. So we take the energy in one substance and we transfer it to other substances so that the potential energy increases. And this could be, say, the biosynthesis of glycogen. We're taking that glucose and we're turning it into glycogen to be stored for a later use. So it's becoming a potential energy source. So that brings me to our biologically usable energy. So ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is the most important carrier of energy needed for the performance of complex functions in biology. It stores potential energy extracted from food and can yield this source of energy to power biological activities. ATP is the only form of chemical energy that is convertible into other forms of energy used by living cells. This is why it's termed the energy currency. We're able to actually use that energy in a variety of different ways. And finally, deriving energy from food is a complex process. However, because of ATP production, the rate of energy transformation from foods is not concerning. So we're actually able to use stored ATP, as ATP acts as a reservoir that can provide instant energy to cells when it's needed. So we have this store of ATP that we can lean on when the complex process of turning food into ATP is slow. So we can essentially override and access faster energy through ATP stores. So what is ATP? Well, ATP is a three-part structure. The first part being an adenine portion, which you can see in green, that's an adenine base. We then have our ribose portion and 3 linked phosphates. So ATP is going to be formed when ADP, so adenosine phosphate, and inorganic phosphate combine. This requires a significant amount of energy, which a portion of is then stored as potential energy in the chemical bond that's going to link the phosphates to the adenosine group. During hydrolysis, which is the process in which a compound is split into another compound by reacting with water, ATPase, which is an enzyme, catalyzes the reaction when ATP joins with water. The outermost phosphate bond then splits and frees that stored potential energy for work, and that potential energy is about 7.3 kilocalories. This results in the ADP being produced with a phosphate, so we sort of reverse that process. In some cases, an additional energy release happens, and another phosphate is going to release from ADP, resulting in the production of adenosine monophosphate, or AMP. The energy liberated from this process directly transfers to other energy requiring molecules. For example, this energy can be used to power the myosin cross-bridge, leading to a muscular contraction. So that's sort of the brief overview of how ATP is formed, and then essentially ADP and phosphate is used to release that energy. So our energy consumption, where do we get energy? Well, the body's fuel comes from 2 places. The first being the food we eat, and then the energy already stored in the body. There are 3 different energy-containing nutrients, and those are going to be our carbohydrates, our fats, and our proteins, which are our macronutrients. So macronutrients are going to undergo several hydrolytic reactions via digestion to become simpler nutrients that assimilate and absorb into the bloodstream. While some of the molecules are utilized immediately to meet our energy needs, other molecules are going to be stored as potential energy, and these are going to be stored as our glycogen and our triglycerides, which are fat. The total amount of energy obtained depends on the nutrient composition and the amount of food we're consuming. So it depends on the amount of food and then what's the nutrient composition of that food. So digestive efficiency, this is essentially how much energy can become available from the stored energy in foods and is affected by the efficiency of the digestive processes. So DE, or the coefficient of digestibility, is the percent of ingested food that is digested and absorbed to serve the metabolic needs of the body. A COD of 50% means that only half the energy consumed was ultimately absorbed. There are pretty standard ranges for COD of the macronutrients, with lipids and carbohydrates falling at about 90% or more. So this means that 90% of the energy consumed in carbohydrates or fats is absorbed. However, if we look at carbohydrates, fiber is actually going to impact this number. So once we get into our carbohydrate unit, we go into a little bit more detail. You'll have a little bit more of an understanding on that, but essentially a carbohydrate that has a high fiber value has a decreased COD, meaning that less energy is consumed and absorbed with a high fiber food. If we look at protein, we have a range of COD, or digestibility coefficient here, with it ranging from 80 to 97%. And this is going to vary based on the amino acids in that protein or the food source. So protein from plant sources has a lower coefficient of digestibility than from animal sources. And we can use these digestive efficiencies to provide information about how much energy from food is actually available. And we can use that as a major guiding factor for designing dietary programs for weight loss. We can actually use these coefficients to guide the creation of dietary programs. So that sort of brings me to the conclusion of this week's Up to Speed lecture and Get to Know You section. We're going to end on digestive efficiency, as next week we're going to be getting more in depth on digestion, and I just gave you a little sneak peek of what that's going to look like. Please note that you need to select your groups by the end of the week, and be sure to refer to the syllabus on web courses for all of your required activities. If you have any questions or concerns, or would just like to reach out and introduce yourself, feel free to contact me, and I will see you guys next week.